Hey guys, Justin from O'Connor Crystals here. This is our first how-to video. Today I'm going to teach you guys how to make a wire wrap pendant with a simple weave, so enjoy and let us know how we did in the comments. First I'm going to go over what tools you'll need. I've got a pair of flat needle nose pliers here, a pair of snips, and a pair of round pliers. For this wrap, I'm going to use this teardrop labradorite. This is a good stone to experiment with since they're generally pretty cheap and the flash they have is extremely beautiful. Next up is wire. Wire size is generally up to you, but it is good to remember larger gauge wires are stiffer than smaller gauges, and try to think about the size stone you're wrapping. For this wrap, I'm going to use 24 gauge square half hard wire and some 24 gauge half round half hard wire. Okay, that's all we'll need for this wrap. First thing we're going to do is cut 5 square wires, all the same length. Good thing to remember is the thicker the stone is, the more wire you'll need. This wire will act as your frame wire. And for the half round wire, I generally pull out about an arm's length of wire, and I use that pretty much for the whole wrap. For this part, we're going to pick up all 5 of the square wires that we cut that were all the same length. I'm going to lay them out flat. And we're going to take the half round wire that we cut, lay that flat side on top of the 5 square wires. Hold that with one finger and pull the other side of the half round wire around. And do that 3 or 4 times. And when you're done with that, you can snip that wire, and then when you're done with that, you can go ahead and snip that half round wire. And then what we're going to do is take the labradorite cabochon that we have, and we're going to start trying to fit it and trying to get those 2 bands that we just created in the correct spot. Once you have those in a spot that looks like they're pretty even, pretty much in the center of those 5 square wires that we had, you can snip those extra tails off. At this point, I'm going to take my flat-nosed pliers. I'm going to clamp down on those 2 bands that we just made. Not too hard though, that way if they look like they're off later on in the wrap, we can move them and fix that. I'm going to pick that cab back up and put it in the wires that we just banded together. And we're going to try to get those 2 bands that we just created into a good spot that looks even on the cabochon. In this case, they look slightly off, so I'm just going to move them a little bit and get them as close as I can and as even as I can before I bend any wires. Alright, our first bend is going to be on the back bottom. Go right next to that one band that we made. You can clamp down with the needle nose pliers and bend it up a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. You can put your finger on the wire to kind of give it like a rounded look if you wanted to, or you can do that after you make the bends, either way. Again, at this point we're going to pick up the cabochon again, place it in the wires, just double check that those bands look good and even. After we've done that, we're going to go to the front and we're going to bend another wire, which is going to help that cabochon stay in place when we are done. I generally do pretty much the same thing that we did in the back, except with the ones in the front, you kind of want to bend them up and then pull them out a little bit because of the concave front side of that labradorite cabochon. On this particular pendant, I'm only going to bend one side in the front. We're going to do some weaves later, which will help the stone stay in, but usually I make two bends in the front. Once you've checked it to make sure that it looks good and everything looks even, we're going to go halfway up one side, and we're going to take that half round wire again, lay the flat part down on those 5 square wires once again and make it another band. We're going to do the same thing on the other side, that way we have 2 bands and we can make more bends to hold that stone in. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and snip the half round wire. Once you've done that, you can slide those bands up and down the wires to get them in the correct spot or the right spot that you want. But my suggestion is that you at least keep them even. It just makes the pendant look better at the end. Once you've kind of eyeballed where you want them, you can go ahead and snip the excess half round wire off. You can take the cabochon back up, stick it back in the banded wires that we have. It's starting to look like a frame. Double and triple check that they're in the correct spot that you want them to be before you clamp the wires down. Once you have the bands in the spot that you want them, you can go ahead and clamp those bands down. Once we have those bands in place, we can go ahead and take the flat nose pliers, clamp right above where one of the initial bands are, and you can bend that right in. I should mention you want to make sure that you're only bending the outermost wires. And then you can do the exact same thing to the other side. As you can see, we're starting to get that frame looking pretty good. Alright, now we're going to go up about 1/4 inch on one side. And we're going to do the same thing make a band that holds those 5 wires together. Okay, now that we did that, you can go ahead and snip the excess half-round wire that we used to band those together. You can go ahead and pick that cab back up, place it in the frame that we've got going. Make sure the band you just made is pretty much at the top point of that teardrop. Once you have that in the place that you want, you can go ahead and slightly clamp down on that band. That way it doesn't move around too much on you, but you can still move it if you need to. Now you can do the same thing we've done previously. Clamp the outermost wire that you have of the frame just underneath the band we just made and bend it down. I should mention that when you make these bands, you should be holding the 5 wires above where you're bending. That way they don't move on you, and the band itself doesn't move too much on you either. After that, we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So I'll speed this part up for you. Alright, you can stick the cab back in there and make sure that the top bands are in the correct place. Make sure you're pushing that stone down as far as you can so it's seated in the wire as far down as it can go. Alright, now that we got all the back wires bent and the bands in the spots that we want, flip it over and we can bend the last 2 wires that we need for the stone to be held in place. And remember that when you are bending the front wires, make sure that you bend them in and then pull them out a little bit. That way they kind of go over the concave of the cabochon. Alright, now that we did that, you want to take your needle nose pliers, clamp just above the band that we were just working on, and bend it up so that those wires are kind of out of the way for the other side. Once you do that, you can do the exact same thing to the other side. This is why I like working with labs so much. The flash on them is amazing, and there's so many different colors, it's nuts. Alright, now that we have the stone pretty much held in place, I like to take the outermost back wire, one of the 2, bend it down, and then wrap it around the grouping of 10 ends. 2 or 3 times is what I like to do. You can do it as many times or little times as you want. Now that that's together and held in place, I like to take each grouping of wire ends and bend them apart. And this way you can get that one wire that we wrapped around the top of the pendant, just bend it right inside and snip it as close as you can to the middle and kind of tuck that end down. Alright, now that the end is kind of tucked away, you can take either, the couple wires from either side that are in the front of the pendant, or you can take the wires in the back of the pendant and do the same thing. I don't really have a preference. I kind of switch it up as often as I can. For this pendant, I'm going to pull 3 wires forward. Depending on the size of your pendant that you're working on, you can do as little as 2 to as many as you want. Just depends on how you want to do the weave, or how you want it to look, or how thick you want it. These wires are going to become your bail. You're going to start it just like we did with the bands that go up the side of the frame, and you're just going to wrap it all the way up until you get to the end of the wires. Alright, now that we've done that, I'm going to kind of leave that alone for a little while, bend it back and out of the way. Now we're going to start doing the individual wires, and in a little bit we'll do the weave. Alright, so this is where your artistic talent comes into play. You can pretty much do whatever you want to do with the excess wires. Obviously for this pendant, I'll just show you what I did. You can play with them and do whatever you want to do with it. So for this first wire, I kind of just take one of the excess wires and I wrap it around and try to get it to just look like it's kind of flowing, if that makes sense. Once you get that first wire in place and you got it where you want it, you're going to have to anchor that wire to the back of the pendant. And the easiest way to do that is to take one of those bends that we made early on in the frame and bend it up so you can get that wire to go through it and around it. You want to be pretty careful while you're doing this, just because this is on the back of the pendant. And if you slip, it can make a sharp spot on the silver and scratch whoever's wearing it. So you want to avoid that. Alright, now that you have that anchored down, we can move on to the next part. For this one, I'm going to take the remaining wire that is on the one side And I'm pretty much do the same thing, just in a different area, so that it adds a little bit to the pendant. For this next wire, I didn't record all of it. I did record the very end of it just so you can see it. I basically just take the half round wire and I coil it around a single square wire, which takes a while, which is why I didn't record it. And for this wire, I'm going to pretty much do what I did with the last wire. I'm going to wrap it around following that wire, using it as like a guide for it. And for this one, I didn't snip the half round wire too early because I wasn't exactly sure how much of the square wire I would need to get around the front of it. So as I'm following that one wire, I'm making sure that I'm coiling the square wire enough before I snip it. Now I want this coil to follow the same path, and I made a loop with the original wire that went around the front, so I'm going to put the coil underneath the original loop and loop the coil. And to end that coil, just anchor it to one of the back wires just like we did earlier. Now we're going to start the weave. To start the weave, I'm going to take another arm's length of half round wire, same 24 gauge, half hard. So this is a good way to tell what side of the half round wire you're working, because sometimes it's very small and it's very hard to tell which side is which. But if you take it and you bend it and the light hits it, you can absolutely tell which side is which. Alright, now we're going to start the weave. I'm going to do my best to take good video so you can actually see what I'm doing, but also try to explain what I'm doing as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to start off by taking the flat side of the half round wire, and you're going to go around the 3 remaining wires 4 or 5 times. Now you're going to start the actual weaving pattern. For this, it's going to be kind of hard for me to actually be able to show you how to start it, but the best way for me to describe it is you're going to take that half round wire and you're going to wrap, instead of wrapping all of them together, you're going to wrap two of them, 3 times or 4 times. In this particular case, I think I did 4 wraps. And then after you go around 4 times, then on the 5th and 6th wrap around, you're going to wrap all of the wires together. And then you're going to keep going back and forth from wrapping 2 wires 4 times to wrapping all wires 2 times. I've been doing this long enough, so I have a good idea of where I need to stop the half round wire. But it would be a good idea if you wanted to do what we did with that single coil, where you kind of do part of it and then you lay it where you want, make sure that you have enough, and if you don't, just keep wrapping before you cut that half round wire off completely. Alright, now that we got the weave done, I'm going to take that weave, I'm going to bend it over, and then start bending it to the contour of the cabochon that we're using. When you start going around the corner, you can use the cabochon kind of as a guide. Now that we have that where we want it, I'm going to take the innermost wire end and I'm going to bend it back to the back side of the pendant, and I'm going to anchor it down there. One thing I forgot to mention is that when you're anchoring these wires to the back of the pendant, once you snip it, you want to leave just enough wire that you can kind of tuck it under the wire that you anchored it to. That way it doesn't poke anybody when they're wearing it. Alright, and we are almost done. We just gotta do a couple more design things and then do the bail and we'll be finished. Right now I'm just taking the needle nose pliers and I'm bending that weave down a little bit so it kind of closes up the gap that's between the weave and the stone. But once I tighten that wire in the back, it'll tighten it up also, so it shouldn't be too bad. Next, we got to figure out what we want to do with the 2 ends that are left from the weave. Again, you can pretty much do whatever you want to do, whatever you think looks best. I like to make little curly cues, so that's what I'm going to do with these 2 wires. And I do that just by bending the wire back, making sure that area that's bending, it stays pretty round as I can keep it. And I'm going to take those round needle nose pliers and I use that to finish off that curly cue. last thing that we need to do is finish off this bail. For this pendant, I started the bail in the front, so I'm going to bend it backwards, trying to make it pretty round. And again, I try to make the wire look like it's kind of flowing, so I'm shaping the bail to kind of match how that weave is going down. And then I wrap the bail around the top part of the pendant, make sure that it's straight up. I've got 3 wires here, so I'm going to take one of those wires again and I'm going to wrap it around to the back and anchor it down somewhere back there. After I've got that one anchored down, I am going to take the 2 remaining wires and I'm going to do those little curly Q things again. And there we go, we're done with the pendant. I hope that wasn't too difficult, and I hope it was at least relatively easy to follow along with. Thank you again for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and please like, share, and subscribe if you like our videos. Thanks again. Have a good day.